So the left is not happy about all of the media attention surrounding the Gabby Petito case, and people are now armchair quarterbacking the officers who dealt with them in Utah. People are starting to armchair quarterback these Utah police officers who were called to or responded to a possible domestic disturbance involving Brian Laundrie and Gabby Petito. Their body camera footage was released to the public, and now people are starting to pick them apart, starting to wonder if there's something more they could have done. Domestic violence experts are coming out of the woodwork to try and evaluate this case, and it's all just a bunch of nonsense. And we are going to go through the video, or at least a few clips of it, and I will give you sort of my take on it. But first, I wanted to remind you all that you can still order a copy of my book, Never Off Duty, through DeAngeloPublications.com. It will be released tomorrow. It's still available for pre-order. If you want to get on that today, I'll be signing the first 1,000 copies. I'm going to be busy doing that for the next couple of days. So don't hesitate. Go online to DeAngeloPublications.com. Pre-order your copy. I will leave a link in the description section. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell so you can get notifications. Leave a comment, share the video. Okay, so like I said, we're gonna get into the video, and we're gonna break it down sort of step by step and kind of show you that these officers did what they could for Brian and Gabby with the information they had available to them. The problem is people, what they tend to do is after the fact judge police officers based on the information we have after the incident instead of the information that was available to officers at the time of the call and the circumstances and facts known to them at the time of the call. So let's start with the first clip where the officer initially makes contact with them.
Sorry, officer.
You want to place your vehicle into park and go ahead and turn it off for me? No, park?
Oh, it isn't parked yet.
Okay, turn off your engine. Go ahead and set your keys on the dash for me, all right? What's your guys' names?
I'm Brian.
Gabby, Brian? Okay. What's going on? How come you're crying?
I'm sorry, we've just been fighting this morning. Some personal issues.
It was a long day. We were camping yesterday, and camping got stuff, flies and stuff. I'm sorry I hit the bump there.
I was distracting him from driving, I'm sorry.
Okay, so she says, I was distracting him from driving, I'm sorry. So that's sort of the theme of this whole interaction, is that they were driving down the road and they were having an argument, and Gabby seemed to be the one who was a little less rational. She later admits to sort of hitting him and punching him and slapping him and sort of pulling at him and scratching at him, and that's what initially drew the officer's attention to their vehicle. As Brian is driving down the road, Gabby is distracting him by punching him and hitting him. Now, this in no way is meant to disparage Gabby. She's the victim of a homicide, and it's very sad. I'm not trying to trample on her grave at this point. What I'm trying to do solely with this video, the only purpose of this video, is to point out that these officers were not at fault. They did everything they could have done, like I said, with the information that was available to them at the time.
Can I get you to step out of the vehicle for me, man?
Yeah.
Just hang tight right there.
Okay, I'm going to fast forward through this just a little bit. He takes her back near his vehicle to talk to her. See, now this is common in domestic violence situations for the officers to separate the two, separate the male and the female, so that the female is not afraid to say what she needs to say to the officer without being worried that the male half of this is within earshot and will hear what she has to say. So he brings her back to his patrol car and they start talking.
Have the female that was in the passenger seat separated from the male. Keys are on the hood. You want to tell me what's going on?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, some days I have really bad OCD, and
Okay.
I was just cleaning and straightening up the back of the van before, and I was apologizing to him and saying, I'm sorry that I'm so mean, because sometimes I have OCD.
Okay, so she says she has OCD. I'm sorry for being so mean. She later goes on to say that, I'm in a bad mood, and it sounds like, maybe she takes it out on him a little bit verbally, whatever the case is. But she's upset about something. We really don't know exactly what it is, other than listening to her story and his story. It sounds like the van that they've been traveling in and living in started to get dirty. She wanted it clean. She was trying to clean it, and that was making her anxious, and she was getting frustrated. And then they start arguing.
And sometimes I just get really frustrated. Not like mean towards him. I just like, I guess my vibe is like I hear him be like in a bad mood. And I was just saying, I'm sorry if I'm in a bad mood. I've just been really stressed. I had so much work I was doing on my computer this morning.
What do you do for a living?
Well, I used to work at an organic juice bar, but I just quit my job.
Okay.
I was a nutritionist. That was my
That's
job.
cool.
And I just quit my job to travel across the country. And I'm trying to start a blog. I just have a blog and stuff. So I've been building my website. So I've just been really stressed. And he doesn't really believe that I could do any of it. So that's kind of...
Okay, so at this point, it's kind of typical lovers quarrel type stuff, right? Typical life stuff, right? She's starting a blog, which she's been documenting on, I think, YouTube and Instagram, and it sounds like that was sort of a source of friction between the two of them. Something that's a passion of hers, and she wants to get it up and running, and maybe he was a little bit skeptical of the whole thing. Anyway, there's a couple reasons why they're fighting and arguing and bickering, but none of it this far is in any way indicative that there's about to be a homicide.
Tell me what's going on.
She just gets worked up sometimes, and I try and really distance myself from her. So like I locked the car and I walked away from her. What happened this morning is that she's trying to start up like her own little website blog and everything. So I give her time, and we really had a nice morning, if anything. But she just got worked up because we were trying to get going and get our day going because we want to go like arches before this stuff.
Okay. You want to tell me about those scratches on your face?
Okay, so he's got some scratches on his face and some scratches on his arms that the police officer has noticed. And initially, you'll notice that Brian is trying to downplay it a little bit. He's not trying to get Gabby in trouble. He doesn't want to press charges. He's not trying to make her out to be, crazy person or anybody who's at fault. So my point is right now, Brian seems to be very calm and reasonable. Okay, now keep in mind again, the officers don't have the benefit of foresight. They don't know what happens in the future at this point to Gabby. So they have no reason to suspect that there's anything malicious afoot at this point, other than he might be now the victim of a domestic assault.
She had a cell phone in her hand. That's why I was pushing her away, because she wanted I locked the keys so I could walk away. I said, let's just take a breather and let's not go anywhere. Let's just calm down for a minute.
Okay, so one of the things that I heard one of these domestic violence experts say is that Brian was not taking responsibility for his actions, but that Gabby was taking responsibility for the whole incident. Now, what I just heard Brian say was that he admitted to pushing her away, and he said he didn't think, or he wasn't sure if that was the right thing to do or not, but he was trying to get her away from him so that they could separate and stop arguing and stop fighting and let the situation breathe for a minute.
And then she had her phone and was trying to get the keys from me, so I got in the way. I was just trying to, I know I shouldn't push, but I was just trying to push her away to go, let's just take a minute, step back and breathe. And she got me with her phone.
Can I see your hand? Oh, you got a mark right here.
Oh, that's from a wire.
That's from a wire?
Yeah.
You want to tell me about hitting that curb?
Hitting the curb was her grabbing the wheel.
She grabbed the wheel?
Yeah. She said, I can't believe we're getting pulled over, and then she grabbed the wheel.
Okay, so again, the reason the officer initially happened upon the vehicle, I believe, after the 911 call was made, where a passerby saw the two of them fighting, and it got physical. Whether he was pushing her away or whether she was hitting him, it's not really clear what exactly the passerby saw. But as the officer approached the vehicle, he noticed that the vehicle hit the curb. They were going fast, hit the curb, and that's when the officer initiated the stop. And that's what Brian is explaining at this point. Now, you'll notice that one of the backup officers sort of speculates as to why Brian says that it was Gabby that was pulling the wheel, which caused them to which caused him to hit the curb. And it's actually kind of interesting, his take on this. We'll get to that in just a second.
Where'd you hit him? You slapped him first? It's on his face? How many times did you slap? Bravo, Romeo.
Okay, I don't know if you can hear it that well, but you can hear the officer asking about her slapping him. She's admitted to slapping him in the face at this point.
India, Alpha, November. And then what? And his reaction was to do what? He's gonna be out of Florida. He just grabbed you? Did he hit you though? I mean, it's okay if you're saying you hit him, but I understand if he hit you, but we want to know the truth if he actually hit you. Because where did he hit you? Don't worry, just be honest.
All right, keep in mind that Gabby is separated from Brian, okay? He can't hear what she's saying. She's in the back of a patrol car. She's got 2 police officers with her. She's perfectly safe at this point. If something was wrong, I mean, other than the domestic violence situation that they're currently dealing with, but if Gabby felt like she was in danger and that Brian was a threat to her, she had every opportunity at this point to tell these officers about it, and they would have dealt with it at that point. You even hear them talk about taking her to jail because she is the suspect in this domestic assault, and Brian's the victim. So there were several opportunities I guess at least for Gabby, to distance herself from Brian even more so than she is now. But again, there's no threat at this point, at least not a deadly one.
You slapped your face or what? Yeah. Go ahead. Okay. So has he been drinking?
Okay, and you'll hear these officers ask about drugs, they ask about medications, they ask about alcohol. They go through the whole list of things. Okay, it's not as though this was a routine domestic violence call and they show up and they're like, okay, great, we got another domestic. All right, now what? And then they sort of go through the motions and they dismiss it and let them go. Okay, the officers do a very thorough job at investigating this particular incident. I mean, the body camera footage is almost an hour and 20 minutes long. If that gives you any idea how much time they took in investigating this and the amount of effort that they put into it. So it's not as though they're very nonchalant and apathetic about this. They're taking their time and they're doing a very thorough job.
So it was just more disagreement in that I just wanted to say.
What was the disagreement about?
It was, I wouldn't even call it disagreement. It was just that I'm dirty and I can't change being dirty. Like I got dirty feet, I got sand on my flip-flops and stuff like that. It was that we were at the coffee shop for so long because we were there from 9 to 3. So I guess there's a few little things, little relationships. I don't know if you're in a relationship, but I'm sure you
I've been married for over 5 years now. So.
There's a lot of little things.
Yeah, I can go.
And
I get it.
We weren't physical before the point where I said, all right, let's just take a breather and like walk away for a minute. I'll lock the van up and I'll go for a walk this way, and you can go walk that way on the block. There's that what is it called, Moonflower?
Right,
Nice areas. You can go either way. It's all shaded. So let's go for a little walk and breathe or come back. Because we're happy with it. But she just, I'm not upset with her. She got worked up and she had her phone in her hand and her keys and everything. And she wanted, not her keys, her rings. She had her rings, her phone. And I was holding on to the keys because I didn't want to go anywhere. And my big fear is, I don't have my phone. I don't have my phone. So she goes off without me. With a car, I'm on my own. So I was saying, let's just go for a walk. And she was trying to get the keys for me. So I was just going, just wait, back up. And that's when she hit me. And I didn't get, I don't want to push you, but I didn't get overtly physical. I was just trying to keep her away and not get hit. And then I got really loud, and like that's probably drew everyone's attention where I was going, back up, get away, just give me a...
Okay, so he's explaining that the only reason he put his hands on her in the first place was basically in self-defense. Okay, it sounds like she was aggressing him, she was hitting him, she was upset, she was emotional, and he was trying to do what he could to keep from getting hit while sort of applying the minimal amount of resistance or force against her so that he wouldn't injure her. And that sounds very reasonable to me. Okay, again, I'm not defending Brian's actions after all of this, but you have to remember that this took place on August 12th, and sort of the suspicion and the confusion as to Abby's whereabouts didn't really come about until the 25th. So we're like a week and a half or so removed from the time of Abby's disappearance or the time of her murder, and so there's no reason to infer from any of this so far that a homicide is imminent with these two. Okay, there's no indicators, there's no signs. He's being very calm, he's being very rational. He's not nervous, he's not fidgety, he's not being deceptive. He's cooperating with the officers. There's no reason for any of these officers to believe that Brian is eventually going to murder Gabby.
Saw the male strike the female. He saw the male trying to lock her out of the vehicle. She even told us that he was trying to lock her out, told her to go take a walk, so that she was trying to get in. She eventually couldn't get in and actually clawed her way in through the driver's door. He says, I don't understand why she's doing that. Well, I think it's because it was the only door that wasn't locked that she could get through. So she's trying to get in over him. He's trying to...
I'm going to fast forward through this just a little bit where he starts to
saw
explain.
him shove her, but I couldn't tell if it was an aggression against her or a defense against her as far as her,
He eventually starts to explain what their options are
so at this point,
legally.
From what, unless the guy's screaming that he needs to go to jail and did something to this girl, it sounds to me like she is the primary aggressor.
Yeah.
Now, the problem with her being the primary aggressor is in incidents of domestic assault, be it a male or be it a female, we shall arrest. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they have to go to jail. We can do a citation if it meets one of three criterion, which one of them is that we can ensure that they're not going to further risk each other's safety. But the problem with that is they live in the same vehicle.
That's what I was going to say. The other part of it is
there was actually an injury too to the victim, which is him.
Right, and I'm getting conflicting stories about why they hit the curb up here.
What did he say? Why he hit the curb?
Well, I watched. This is what I saw first. Saw him cross the double yellow. I was doing 42 miles an hour. I was, I don't know, probably 2 car lengths behind him, tapping my wheels at him, trying to get his attention. They knew I was behind him. And then after he crossed the double yellow, he merged over into the right lane, and then out of nowhere, just boom, went and hit the curb.
So did he tell you why?
He said that she grabbed the wheel and turned it real hard. She said that she was hitting him in the arm. So
sounds legit. I mean, I'm sure if I'm driving and my arm's on the wheel and I'm getting hit in the arm, I'm probably pulling out the wheel.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was a little of both. I mean, usually the truth is somewhere between. He's probably trying not to say that he hit her because he probably doesn't want her charged with assault, domestic assault. He probably...
Okay, so that's what I was referring to earlier. Now, these officers are having this little sidebar, trying to figure out what exactly their options are as far as, criminal charges, and if they take somebody to jail, if they separate them for the night, if they give someone a citation, and what this officer was indicating as far as the discrepancy between their two stories. Gabby said that, she was hitting him, and that's what caused the distraction. Brian said that she pulled on the wheel. He didn't want to essentially... He didn't want to throw her under the bus and say, well, she was hitting me, because that means she's, because that equates to domestic battery, and that's a charge against her. So he's trying to avoid that. So Brian at this point is trying to avoid Gabby going to jail, and that's why his story doesn't match hers. Now, Gabby's being honest, and she's telling the officers what happened, which is good for her. But I think Brian at this point is trying to cover for her because he doesn't want her to go to jail. Now, the reasons for that, who knows? It's only speculation at this point. But like I said, we're far removed from the point where Gabby ends up deceased. So it's hard to say at this point what Brian's intentions were with these officers and explaining the story that he explained to them. Was he trying to keep her out of jail because he wanted to kill her, because he had a plan to kill her? Were they still very much in love at this point? And then things just got progressively worse as their trip progressed, and it ended up in a deadly domestic violence situation. Those are questions that are still unanswered because we haven't been able to talk to Brian yet because he's still missing. So in the next couple of clips, you'll see the officers, or the one officer explaining to Gabby what he intends to do at this point, and they explain to Brian, which I'm not going to show. I'm not going to show the entire clip, the entire footage, because it's very lengthy and we don't have time. But they explain to him that based on the information that they've gotten so far and based on the circumstances, because Brian's got scratches on his upper arm, he's got scratches on his hands and on his face, and Gabby admits to hitting him and scratching him and slapping him. So that's a domestic battery. In the state of Utah, they're required to either cite someone or take someone to jail, and to issue a no contact order, which is something that the officers are very sort of resolute in doing, and they're trying to explain that to Brian. And you'll see, if you watch the whole video, you'll see Brian saying, "Well, can I just go to jail instead? She doesn't have to go to jail, does she? And how do I get this sort of expunged, or how do I resolve this?" And they explain to him that he's got to go down to the courthouse the following day and sign a waiver and all of that stuff. So the next couple of clips, you'll see them explaining to Gabby what is going to happen.
How you answer this question is going to determine what happens next. But the only person who can answer this question is you. Think very hard before you answer the question. Do not quickly answer it. Think very hard. When you slapped him those times, were you attempting to cause him physical pain or physical impairment? Was that what you were attempting to do to him?
No.
What were you attempting to do? What was the reason behind the slapping and stuff? What was it you were attempting to accomplish by slapping?
I was trying to get him to stop telling me something.
Well, it doesn't sound to me like she attempted to injure him.
Okay, so this officer is trying to give her an out here, right? He knows, and you'll see him or hear him explain in a different part of the video, that you have Gabby. She's 22 years old. She's very slight. She weighs maybe 110 pounds, and she's not a threat to Brian, okay? Even though she was hitting him and she's the primary aggressor in the incident, she's not a threat to him. Brian can definitely defend himself against Gabby. What they're trying to do is avoid taking her to jail because they've got two people from out of town. Neither of them have a place to stay. If one of them stays with the van, the other one has to either go to a hotel or go to jail. And so they're trying to help them figure this situation out without, completely putting them under, I guess, undue stress and inconvenience. So this officer just given her an out. And then in the next clip, you'll see that they decide not to take any enforcement action at all.
I've decided I am not going to cite you for domestic violence battery, okay? It was only going to be a Class B misdemeanor. However, the domestic violence portion of it enhances it. Makes life a major pain in the butt, especially you're 22, right? So I'm choosing not to cite you today. So you are not going to be charged with it. Alright? But this is what I do have to do. I am separating the two of you tonight.
Okay, so the two of them get separated for the night. What happens is they end up giving Gabby the keys to the van. She goes on her way. They take Brian to a motel. Okay, so let's pretend for a minute that Gabby went to jail. If she went to jail, she would be out the next day because Brian would probably come up with enough bond money to go bond her out. They'd be out and they'd be in the same situation. So whether the officers took any enforcement action and took her to jail, which was the most that they could probably do in that case, we would still have the same outcome. But it's not the fault of the officers at all what ends up happening to Gabby. Okay? Again, she had the van. Brian did not have a car. He didn't have access to a car. He was driven to a motel by one of the police officers. And he doesn't even have a phone. Gabby's the only one with a phone. So, again, if Gabby felt like Brian was a threat and that she was in danger staying with him, she had the van. She could have taken off as soon as they gave her the keys and let her go. But she didn't do that. Obviously, they ended up reuniting the next day, and they continued on with their trip. So, for those of you who are sort of picking these officers apart and telling that, making assertions that there's more they could have done, that they need to be more aware of mental health issues and domestic violence issues, FO. Okay, you have no idea what you're talking about. Obviously, you haven't watched the entire body cam footage. you probably didn't listen to the most important part, which was probably the sidebar between the two officers trying to figure out what exactly they were going to do with those two. They explored all of their options, and they came up with the best one, given the circumstances and information that was available to them at the time. Again, officers don't have the benefit of foresight, and while we have the benefit of hindsight, we have to remember and try to evaluate situations like this, pretending that we don't know any of the aftermath of this, pretending that we don't know that Gabby went missing and then she was eventually found dead. Okay, we can't judge this particular incident using any of that information, because the officers didn't have that information because it didn't happen. Okay, so just the domestic violence experts, they're doing the exact same thing, only they label themselves as experts, so they get put on the news and try to armchair quarterback what these officers did. These officers did the only thing they could have done in that situation, because like I said, I mean, they did have other options, but taking her to jail would have resulted in the exact same thing. They would have been reunited the next day. She could have bonded out, and they would have continued on with their trip, and the exact same thing would have happened. Again, she had the opportunity to flee if she felt like she needed to do that. Okay, but Black Lives Matter hasn't been the center of attention for 5 minutes, so you have people like Joy Reid trying to make the Gabby Petito case a source of racial tension.
The story has captivated the nation, has many wondering, why not the same media attention when people of color go missing? Well, the answer actually has a name: missing white woman syndrome, the term coined by the late and great Gwen Ifill to describe the media and public fascination with missing white women like Laci Peterson or Natalie Holloway, while ignoring cases involving missing people of color.
Okay, that's just not accurate. Okay, the reason cases like this end up getting national news coverage is because of the circumstances. It has nothing to do with the color of their skin. When I was a detective, I investigated several missing person cases. Most of them were white women, and not a single one of them made national news. Okay, and the United States averages over 500,000 missing person cases every year, and you see maybe a fraction of those end up on the news. And the cases that the examples that she gave with Laci Peterson and Natalie Holloway, first of all, that was an international incident. She went missing in Aruba, and she still hasn't been found. Okay, Laci Peterson, that was an incident similar to this. Okay, so the reason, in my opinion, the reason cases like this end up going viral, end up with as sort of a national news sensation, is because there's certain similar circumstances, sort of that murder mystery element to it. People love murder mysteries. They love listening to those podcasts, and they love trying to sort of figure out and solve the mystery to this. Laci Peterson was murdered by, I believe it was her husband. So whenever there's a domestic violence element to it, and if there's children involved, and if there are family members who report the person missing, and those family members are, trying to plead with whoever it might be to help them find their missing loved one, okay, those types of incidents spark national or capture the attention of the nation. It has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with people not caring about black people. That's completely ludicrous.
So similar. A journalist friend of mine, Derica, sent me this story about a young, about some other people that are missing. There's one guy whose name is Daniel Robinson. Daniel Robinson is a young black man. He's only 24 years old, 5'8", 165, black hair, brown eyes. That's his description. His dad has hired a private investigator to find him. He's missing part of an arm. He was last seen driving away from his job site in the Buckeye, Arizona desert on June 23rd. And his case struck me because it's very similar. He's missing in the same part of the world. It's a case that it has all of that same kind of sizzle, this sort of mystery of it. This young man who just goes missing. I never heard of it until this friend of mine sent it to me.
So to compare this case, this Daniel Robinson case, not that it's not tragic, it is, but it's apples and oranges if you consider the circumstances. First of all, Daniel Robinson is a man. People tend to have less sympathy for men than they do for women because women are more vulnerable. Okay, they have they're less capable of protecting themselves from dangers of the world. So I think that's probably one of the biggest factors in this case. I don't think race has anything to do with it. Okay, and there's plenty of coverage on Daniel Robinson's case. You just have to. I mean, if you Google it, you can find plenty of articles and plenty of news coverage. Just because it's not being covered day to day doesn't mean that nobody cares and nobody's looking for him. Okay, but there's also not that element of that murder mystery vibe in Daniel Robinson's case. He went to work and he drove away from the work site and then went missing. That's it. He wasn't documenting his work on social media, on YouTube or Instagram. He didn't have national attention before. He wasn't on some sort of adventure like Gabby and Brian were. There's no domestic situation involved. Okay, there's no disgruntled or jaded spouse involved with this. Those are the types of circumstances that tend to draw national attention. But just because a person of color goes missing and it's not on Fox News and CNN every day doesn't mean nobody cares. Let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you like the episode, like, comment, and share. Let me know your thoughts, how you think these police officers did, if you agree, if you disagree. Let me know in the comments.